This section will show you how to keep score. Please make sure to fill out the score sheets completely and correctly. Keep in mind the game hosts will use this information to complete the post-game reports, and they might get cranky if they are missing the data they need. Everyone on each team should be trained to be a scorekeeper using official Granny basketball score sheets. Here one is on this slide. There is also a sample in your packet. Learning to run the electronic scoreboard, or the clock, is more complicated, and not everyone feels comfortable for that job. However, at least 2 members of each team should be trained for scoreboard duty. When your team has been scheduled for scorekeeping duties at games, at least 2 or possibly 3 people are required. One will keep the paper score sheet for one team, and the other granny will keep the paper score sheet for the other team. The third person may be required to run the clock. Try to report to the scores table 5 or 10 minutes prior to game time to get everything ready. Every venue has their own brand of scoreboard, and they are all slightly different. It has been suggested that written instructions be kept on or near the control panel. The game host is responsible for seeing that instructions are available. Alternatively, the host can provide a live person to either run the clock or be available to teach one of the designated Granny scorekeepers how to do it. On game day, the Granny scorekeeper for the first game should stay around long enough after the game to teach the upcoming scorekeeper for game 2. Then that Granny will train the next one, and so on. Remember, the clock is only stopped for every foul, Granny down, time out, or the end of each period of play, and will only resume when an inbound player touches the ball. On the official score sheet, make sure the date, venue, team names, etc. are recorded correctly at the top of the page. If there are several games that day, indicate which game you are keeping score for in the box on the top right. The rosters. The captain of each team should fill out their rosters to give to the scorekeepers. Have the announcer call the captains to the scorers table if you don't have rosters. Players' first and last names should be recorded, as well as uniform numbers. Players are to be listed in numerical order by their collar numbers. Next, scoring. Keep score by quarter and total in the appropriate box. Synchronize your totals with the electronic scoreboard after each quarter. Do not use tick marks for points scored. Use numbers 1, 2, or 3. The referee will rule whether points are a 2 or a 3. Fill in the total score by quarter and compute the final points for each forward on the right. Note, the possession column on the far left side of the sheet can be used to keep track of possession for altered possession situations if the electronic scoreboard does not keep track. Fouls. When a player fouls, cross off a number in the foul column next to her name. Be sure you have the right player on the right team. Sometimes 2 have the same collar numbers. Notify the referees, you can holler, when a player has 3 fouls and fouls out. Or have the electronic scoreboard person sound the buzzer or ask the announcer to make the announcement. The clock will have stopped at the referee whistle. At the end of the game, total all the columns. Vertical column totals should match horizontal row totals. Record the final score and identify clearly which team won. Have the referees and captains sign at the bottom of the page. Leave the completed form or forms on the scorer's table to be picked up by the game host. If you have been running the scoreboard clock, make sure the next person knows how before you leave the area. The league recommends that all players who are present for a game have the opportunity to play. However, teams are allowed to develop their own team rules and policies regarding playing time for their players. It is expected that referees and all members respect individual teams' decision regarding their policies and style of play. It is not your job to criticize. Coaching, laughing, and cheering on the bench or on the court is permitted. A fun, relaxed, and casual atmosphere is encouraged. Also, be aware that the playing rules for Granny basketball are not to be changed. We do, however, sometimes clarify rules and/or change policies or procedures. It is necessary that all players, but especially the referees, be proactive and keep up to date on any changes. Be sure to read your emails and director bulletins regularly and pass along information to the rest of your team. A Granny team consists of at least 5 or 6 women, age 50 or over, 2 guards, 2 forwards, and 1 or 2 centers. The coach may play if otherwise eligible. A team cannot continue to play in league games with fewer than 5 players. A team must have a minimum of 4 permanent team members, but can borrow up to 3 other players for a total of 7 players. Borrowed players must play center positions only. Borrowed players may play on any league team under certain conditions. See Rule 15. Any player may play any position on any team for exhibition or non-league games. Exceptions to the above rules are permitted if both captains agree. Players wear 1920 style uniforms, bloomers, midi blouses, and stockings. No flesh will be exposed except at the face, neck, forearms, and hands. The opposing team will receive 1 point per member if she isn't wearing standard bloomers and/or an acceptable blouse. A technical foul will be assessed at the beginning of the game for each player in violation. Blouse sleeves are to cover the elbows when the player's arms are down at her sides. There is no flesh foul when the arms are raised, even if the elbows and/or upper arms are revealed. A player is assessed a flesh foul for uncovered stomach or legs if on the court and the clock is running. Opponents will receive a free throw and the ball out of bounds for this infraction. A legal bloomer is black with elastic at the knee and blooms 5 inches below the knee. The width of the bloomer at the bottom is a minimum of 15 inches in diameter. Any player who is not wearing approved bloomers may play in all scheduled games that day, but will not be allowed to play in any subsequent games until wearing approved bloomers. Teams or players sometimes want to add accents or sponsor emblems to their uniforms. The Board of Directors, known as the BOD, has written specific guidelines via official resolutions regarding these additions. Check with one of the members of the BOD for details. No jewelry except unadorned wedding bands may be worn. If there are any raised rings, protruding ring settings, even if they are an engagement ring. They must be removed or taped. Players must remove all jewelry to play in the game. This includes watches, bracelets, rings, and earrings. If the jewelry is not removed, the player cannot enter or re-enter the game. The referees are to check for jewelry prior to the coin toss. Officials will also examine players' hands to determine if fingernails, natural or fake, are dangerous looking. They will request the nails be taped or trimmed before the player may enter the game. Some players wear gloves to protect their manicures. This is permitted. The playing area is a standard basketball court divided into 3, but not necessarily equal sections. In general, if a volleyball court is laid out on the floor, use the 10-foot lines to determine the center court. A general rule for center lines would be 6 feet from the edge of the large center circle on each side of the circle. Other adjustments can be made based on the size of the gym. Players may not move out of their designated court when the ball is in play. Players who are taking the ball out in the center circle may stand anywhere in the circle. No other player is allowed inside the center circle until the ball has been thrown to another player. When throwing the ball in from the center circle or from out of bounds, the player must hold position without moving her pivot foot. If her pivot foot is moved, it is a traveling turnover, and the ball is awarded to the other team. When bringing the ball in from the sides or ends of the court, all players must remain a minimum of 3 feet from the boundary lines. The ball may be bounced past in the 3-foot lane, and players may lean or reach over the 3-foot line. If the defensive team enters the 3-foot area, the clock will be stopped and given to the offensive team with a new 5-second count. If the offensive team steps into the 3-foot area, the ball is given to the defensive team. A game consists of 4 8-minute quarters, unless both captains agree to a different time. The clock starts after the ball is touched by an inbounds player. The player throwing the ball into play has 5 seconds to release the ball. The clock continues to run except for timeouts, which are 1 minute, any falls or granny down, injuries, 3-foot violations, and fouls. The clock will stop until the ball is touched by an inbound player from either team. If the quarter ends just before a free throw, the shooter will shoot the free throw and subsequent possession will be awarded according to the alternate possession rule. There is 2 minutes between quarters and 10 minutes between halves. The halftime break can be adjusted to less time if agreed upon by both captains. The game begins after a coin toss by the team captains. The winner of the toss chooses ball possession at the first or second half. The visiting team makes the call as the coin is tossed by the referee. If the visitor has not been predetermined, the referee will choose a number between 1 and 10, and both captains will pick a number. The number closest to the one chosen by the referee will become the visiting team. Whichever team has possession of the ball at the end of the first and third quarters retains possession at the beginning of the next quarter. If no team is in possession of the ball at the end of the first or third quarters, the alternate possession rule will apply. The ball is thrown in from the center circle at the beginning of each quarter. When there is a tie-up, the alternate possession rule applies. Alternate possession originates from the beginning of the first and third quarters. If the score is tied at the end of regulation play, an additional 4-minute overtime period is played. A coin toss determines first possession in the overtime. Additional overtime periods are played until there is a winner. Players move the ball by passing or dribbling in an effort to score or prevent the opponents from scoring. A player cannot walk with the ball, and one foot must remain stationary when the player is stopped. This establishes the pivot foot. If a player in possession of the ball falls, traveling is not called. A player may hand the ball to a team member who is in the same designated court section. A player may not hand the ball to another player who is in a different designated court section or when inbounding the ball. Rule 7b. Only forwards can shoot the ball. If a goal attempt is made by anyone other than a player in the forward court, the basket will not count, and the opposing team will receive the ball. The ball will be brought in from the side, close to the point of infraction. No running or jumping is allowed. Infractions constitute a turnover, and if the player was in the act of shooting, the basket, if made, does not count. Jumping does not include a jump stop, which is defined as stopping with 2 feet rather than just 1. After a made free throw, the ball will be taken out on the end of the court to either side of the basket by the opposing guards. Guards may grab the ball and throw it inbounds without the referee handling it. When throwing the ball in from the sides or ends of the court, other than after a free throw, the referees will designate the spot where the ball is to be thrown in, usually the spot closest to where the infraction occurred. Sometimes, particularly in small gyms, spectators or the scoring bench are very close to the playing floor, so the spot will necessarily have to be moved to a less obstructed place. Two dribbles are allowed per possession per player. However, the ball may be bounced once to obtain possession. This possession dribble does not count as one of the 2 allowed dribbles. Rule 7g. A player cannot pass or dribble the ball to herself, such as she cannot toss the ball in the air, or dribble, take steps, catch it herself, and continue playing. The penalty is a turnover. Rule 7h. During a free throw, once the shooter has possession of the ball, players must remain in their position on the line. If an offensive player moves or enters the lane before the ball leaves the shooter's hand, the ball will be awarded to the defensive team, and the made free throw will not count. If a defensive player moves or enters the lane before the ball leaves the shooter's hand, the shooter will be awarded another shot unless the free throw was made. If the free throw was made, the defense will take the ball out at the end line as usual. If a granny falls down, the referee stops the clock and calls Granny down. The fallen player must leave the game for 1 play. This is for the safety of the player, who may not realize she is actually hurt. And it also discourages players from faking a fall in an attempt to draw a foul or to stop the clock. If this removal would result in a team having to forfeit the game because of too few players, the referee can make an exception and allow the player to stay in the game. If the player was fouled but had to leave the game because of Granny down, the replacement player will shoot the free throw. A foul is defined as any body part other than feet or hands touching the floor. A play is defined as the ball being thrown into another court, a change in possession if the opponents steal the ball, scoring a basket, or other types of plays which, in the opinion of the referee, constitute a play. There are no timelines or lane restrictions. A player may hold the ball for only 5 seconds on the court when the ball is live, as well as 5 seconds when throwing it in from out of bounds or from the center circle. The player with possession of the ball does not have to be guarded for the 5-second count to begin. After a dead ball, the clock will start after an inbounds player touches the ball. The center circle is considered out of bounds when bringing the ball into play at the beginning of each quarter and after a made basket. Stalling is a useful slow-down technique or strategy that may be used by teams to control the pace of the game. Players may pass, hold, or dribble the ball without attempting a shot if they choose. It is the choice of the opponents whether or not they initiate action by guarding their opponents more closely, attempting to steal, or intercepting the ball. No physical contact is allowed. Infractions constitute a foul. A player is eliminated from the game after 3 fouls. Uniform, flesh, and/or jewelry fouls do not count toward the 3 allowed fouls. A technical foul called against a player counts as one of her 3 fouls. When a player fouls out, the referee notifies the player that she is disqualified. Play resumes after she is replaced. No hovering or caging is allowed. When guarding a player, the arms of the guard can only be straight, vertically, horizontally, or diagonally. Hovering over the top of a player or caging around a player are fouls. These occur when the imaginary 3-inch plane around a player's body is broken by any part of the opponent's body. Hovering includes reaching over the top or breaking the plane of a shorter player to obtain a rebound. Breaking the plane only refers to guarding an opponent. It does not apply to a player who may be trying to steal the ball, or when a player intercepts a pass or a dribble and pushes the ball away, except in the case of rebounds, as long as the person who is attempting to steal or push the ball away does not make contact with the person who is dribbling, passing, receiving the ball, then no infraction has occurred. Impeding. Extending the arms or legs fully or partially to impede the movement of an opponent is a foul. You can't stick your leg or arm out to prevent someone from moving around you. In fact, a player may not hold, push, charge, trip, nor impede the progress of an opponent by extending an arm, shoulder, hip, or knee, or by bending the body into other than a normal position, nor use any rough tactics. If a player is fouled in the act of shooting, the shot will count if made, and the shooter will be given 1 free throw attempt. If a player is fouled in the act of shooting but misses the shot, the shooter will be given 2 free throw attempts. If the player is fouled in the act of shooting a 3-point granny shot and the shot is made, she is awarded 1 free throw. If the shot is missed, she will be awarded 3 free throws. At the center lines, players cannot reserve space on the floor by extending their arms outward from their sides. For example, sometimes centers stand at the line waiting for the ball from their forwards or guards, and their arms are extended to their sides. Players may extend their arms forward, but may not extend them to the sides. This is classified as impeding, whether or not contact with an opponent occurs. Impeding is a foul. Players may reach across the center line to retrieve a ball as long as the ball is not rolling on the floor across the line. If it is rolling on the floor and you reach across, then it is a turnover. The use of hands on an opponent in any way is not legal. This includes identifying, an attempt to discover the position of a player behind you. The no touching rule does not apply to helpful, playful, or congratulatory touches. The ball is considered part of the player's body and cannot be touched unless it has been released by the player. Reaching in to steal the ball is allowed, providing the ball is not being held by a player and no contact is created by the defender. No foul will be called. The ball may be stolen while it is being dribbled, after the ball is released, when the player is shooting, when being passed to another player, or any other time that the ball is free of possession. At the center lines, players cannot reserve space on the floor by extending their arms outward from their sides. For example, sometimes centers stand at the line waiting for the ball from their forwards or guards, and their arms are extended to their sides. Players may extend their arms forward, but may not extend them to the sides. This is classified as impeding, whether or not contact with an opponent occurs. Impeding is a foul. A player may not swing her non-dribbling arm toward an opponent to prevent her from stealing the ball during a dribble. Holding the non-dribbling arm in a stationary position, parallel with one's hip to protect the ball, is permissible. A blocking foul is called when a player moves into the path or impedes the movement of a dribbler and contact occurs. A charging foul is called when the defensive player has established legal guarding position in the path of the offensive player. A legal guarding stance is when the defender has both feet on the floor and has held that position for at least 1 second. Face guarding is not allowed. It occurs when the guard intentionally obstructs an opponent's vision by waving or placing hands within 1 foot of the player's face, whether or not the offended player has the ball. Face guarding can occur to any player in the game, guard, forward, or center. This demonstration shows a player-controlled foul, also known as charging, and a blocking foul on the guard. Has the guard established position? If not, it is a blocking foul. If so, the forward has committed a charging foul. Sometimes it's really hard to tell. Take a look at Rule 9N. Moving screens are not allowed and the penalty is a foul. The offensive player, the forward, who is setting a screen or pick, must remain stationary for at least 1 second. If the screener moves to block a defender from guarding her teammate, the result is an offensive foul on the screener. The screened player may not hold, lean, or move into the screener to cause contact. A foul will be called. Also, forwards beware. If guards are standing close together, forwards may not push between the guards to cut or set a screen. Then look at rules 9O, P, and Q. Any player who purposely swings elbows, hits, or pushes another player with her arms or hands will be called for a technical foul and ejected from the game. The opposing team is awarded 2 free throws and possession of the ball. Rule 9R. When a double foul is called, each team gets 1 free throw, and the ball is awarded according to the alternate possession rule. An intentional foul is defined as a foul deliberately committed by a defensive player to stop play. Unlike a flagrant foul, which is defined in Rule 11, an intentional foul is not a technical foul. When an intentional foul is called, the team not committing the foul will receive 1 free throw attempt. Players will line up as usual, and the ball will be in play as soon as the ball leaves the shooter's hands for the free throw. When a technical foul is called, the opponent is awarded 1 free throw and ball possession. If a flagrant foul is called, the opponent is awarded 2 free throws and ball possession. Technical fouls should be reported on the post-game report. If a player is a chronic offender, please refer her to the board of directors. The player may be ejected from the game. If a player is ejected from a game, she will be suspended for the next game. The next game may be the same day or whenever the team has the next scheduled game. This ejection should also be reported on the post-game report. The following infractions will be called technical fouls. They are swearing, questioning a referee's call, or advising him or her while the clock is running, or attempting to influence an official's decision. Throwing elbows or pushing. Unsportsmanlike conduct, including but not limited to baiting, embarrassing, ridiculing, demeaning, or taunting an opposing team's players. Slamming the ball. Using obscene gestures. Flesh calls are only called once per game and do not count as a personal foul. A free throw, however, is awarded. Taunting is defined as shouting anything directly into an opposing player's face or making derogatory comments to the opposing player, whether it's near a player or from a distance. Baiting is an attempt to fool an opponent into thinking you are on her team by calling for a ball. This is an example of baiting. This is an example of defensive jumping. This occurs when a defender is trying to disallow a pass or a shot and thinks there is no penalty for jumping. But just like forwards, defenders may not jump. The penalty is a delay of game technical foul, and the offended team will shoot a free throw and receive possession of the ball.
Okay.
When a foul is called, the clock is stopped. When shooting a foul shot, the appropriate forward must shoot the ball within 10 seconds from the time she receives the ball from the referee, or else she forfeits possession. The referees will wait for the players to line up on the free throw lane and make sure all the players are set. Please note, when players line up for a free throw, the two lane positions to the court side of the large black block on the free throw lane are reserved for the opposing team guards. However, if the guards choose not to stand in those lane spaces, then the forward can. If the other forward chooses not to line up on the lane spaces, she is not required to do so. The ball is in play as soon as the ball leaves the shooter's hands. However, the ball must hit the rim on any missed shots for the ball to continue being played. If it does not hit the rim, the ball is awarded to the opposing team. The clock resumes after a player touches the ball in bounds. The no jumping rule does not apply to free throws. The theory is that the no jumping rule is for safety reasons when a granny is in a crowd of people. Since the shooter at the free throw line is not in a crowd, there is no chance of injury. During a free throw, once the shooter has possession of the ball, players must remain in their position on the line. If an offensive player moves or enters the lane before the ball leaves the shooter's hand, the ball will be awarded to the defensive team, and if made, the free throw will not count. If a defensive player moves or enters the lane before the ball leaves the shooter's hand, the shooter will be awarded another shot unless the free throw was made. If the free throw was made, the defense will take the ball out at the end line. The referee does not have to place the ball on the floor at the free throw lane. We used to do that, but a lot of people complained about it, so now the referees have a choice. When a technical foul occurs, players stand behind the free throw shooter and possession is given to the fouled team. When there is a technical foul, all players except the shooter stand away from the lane and behind the free throw line. Here is a picture of how that looks.